Welcome to the Two Boots Word Vault podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by my son Jesse at a Como Cottage Salon Evening of Stories on December 22nd, 2018. We told the Finnish tale, The Minstrel and the Maid of Beauty. I hope you enjoy this tale. Okay, there we go.
Wait, who's going to introduce you?
I am. This is a story about ego. So, it's kind of curious thinking. Think back there, in the first story we heard about this flute player, flute music coming from underground. And then in Walton's story, there's the song of the buffalo, the magic song, and that brought everything back to life. So the story Jesse and I are going to tell comes from another part of the world. And I'm thinking that, all of these people, they must have known one another. The stories get moved on from one place to the next. This story comes from Upper Finland. The Sami and the Finns, it's from the saga, the Kalevala. This story is called The Magician and the Maid of Beauty. There's an alternative name, and it's called The Minstrel and the Maid of Beauty. So we're going to take the story, we're going to take the songs that come out of the ground, we're going to throw them up in the air so that the moonlight can shine on them. They'll swirl around the top of the house, come down the chimney, leave a few gifts here for us. This is a winter story. This is a story. The reindeer was pulling a sled through the snowy valleys. The minstrel sat erect and upright, and in one hand he had the reins, and in the other hand he had the whip. As it sped through the trees, over the mountains, through the valleys. And the minstrel's thoughts were only of his homeland, farther to the south. And he thought about his home, his cottage, which was a huge cottage, of course, much larger than this cottage. And he thought of his fireside, the fire that would be heating everything up when he got home. And as he sped over the valley snow, he thought he heard something above him. And as he ignored Dame Louhi's caution, Dame Louhi, the crone queen of the Northland, who had lent him the reindeer and the sled, he looked up. And he thought, what's that sound? Is it the sound of birds? It's a strange bird sound. Is it the sound of wind blowing through the pine trees? Is it the sound of a waterfall splashing down onto the frozen rocks and onto the frozen river? Is it the sound of bees humming and flapping their wings and trying to keep the honey from freezing in the hive? It's a familiar sound. It's a musical sound. It sounds a little bit like someone weaving cloth with a shuttle going back and forth and back and forth. And he looked up again and he saw a rainbow. And seated on the rainbow was the Maid of Beauty. And sure enough, she was working a loom with a golden shuttle going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It was a musical sound. It was a beautiful sound. And she was weaving cloth with threads of silver and threads of gold, threads of iridescent colors and brilliant colors, colors of every hue. And she was making this web of magic. But even fairer than this fairy fabric, more radiant than the rainbow itself, was the face of the Maid of Beauty. And the minstrel checked his reindeer, pulled it to a stop. And he called up, he said, "Come on down. Sit down here on the sled with me. Come on." And she just moved faster and faster on her loom. But she heard him. She heard him. And finally she stopped weaving and she said disdainfully, "Who are you, old man?" And he puffed out his chest and he said, "I am Wainamoinen. I am the chief of the minstrels. I am the master of wizards. I am the creator of the Finn harp, the kantali, which every poet uses when he recites his poems, when the sagas are told in the longhouses. That is my instrument. And I am the one who taught them all how to sing and tell the stories. I am the chief. Come on down. Sit here. You're beautiful. Come back with me to my homeland. My people will fall in love with you. And you can bake honey cakes for me. And you can pour beer at my table for my guests. And then you can sing your beautiful songs. I'm sure that you have a beautiful voice. And you'll be my queen. Come on with me. All my people will honor you." Well, she said, "You know, you're a funny fellow. You know, just yesterday I was in the far west and I was walking through the meadows and I was picking flowers and I made a wreath. You see the wreath of flowers that I have on my head? I was walking through the meadows in the far west where there was no snow. And when I was walking through the field, I heard a thrush sing to his mate and his nestlings. And he sang this beautiful song. Summer days are warm and bright. A maiden's heart is always light. Winter's days are long and cold. Beware, beware, the suitor bold. Beware the more, if he be old." Well, Wainamoinen kind of chuckled. He says, "Oh, that's kind of foolish chatter." You know, I'm the chief of the singers. I'm the chief of the minstrels. So that thrush has nothing on me. Come with me. Come on. Just sit down here. We'll go back.
The Maid of Beauty let out a bellowing laugh. And from the bowels of the valley it stormed up, and when it hit Wainamoinen's ears, it was just this piercing laughter. And she said to him, "Well, if you are this great wizard, if you are this hero from the south, you must prove your magic to me. Can you take a hair and cut it in half with a blunt knife? Or perhaps draw up an egg with an invisible string that no one can see?" Well, Wainamoinen smirked a little bit, because this is below him. This is easy magic. And so he catches one of her blonde hairs that was floating in the wind that she had dropped. And he takes out his large knife that is dull. You could just, go like that and nothing happens. And he takes the hair and he dangles it right over. And not only does he cut it in half, he cuts it in quarters and eighths and sixteenths. And then he finds a raven's nest up in a tree and he climbs up And he looks to her and says, and he draws the egg with an invisible string. He says, see, I have performed my magic. Come down, become the queen of the south. You will pour my beer, you will bake my honey cakes. Come, sit in my sled and we will be off. She says, well, not yet. Your magic is, it's nice, but I need to see more. You need to prove yourself a wizard if I'm going to be the hero's queen of the south. Can you break sandstone with your fingers and split a whole cliffside? And can you go down to the frozen river at the bottom of the valley and remove a whipstaff from the ice without leaving a single shard left or breaking off a piece? Well, Väinämöinen smirks again. He says, oh. So he sees the cliff face and he charges up and he sees a crack and he takes his hands and he pulls the cliff apart. And then he slides down to the bottom of the valley where the river is frozen over and he grabs a whipstaff without leaving a tiny shard of ice. And it's whole. And she's like, oh, you do have some magic, I see. Okay, all right. If I am going to be your queen, you need to prove yourself to me one more time, and I need to see some serious magic from you. So, you see this shuttle that I have from my loom, and the spindle. If I were to break this into the tiniest splinters and throw them at your feet, you will need to repair these shards in these little splinters of my shuttle and spindle and make a boat with them. And we shall ride that boat down to the south, but you must put it into the water without the use of your arms or your legs. And if you do that, I will be your queen.
Old Väinämöinen stroked his gray beard, He said, yeah, that's a pretty difficult task. However, under the sun, there's no one but me. I'm the only one who can perform that task. But it's going to take me a little while. The Maid of Beauty had thrown the shuttle and the spindle onto the ground in front of him. They shattered on the rocks. And he picked up all the splinters. And he began to put piece by piece, put this thing together in the shape of a boat. For the first day, he used nothing but his hatchet. For the next 3 days, he used his hammer, tacking all the pieces together, magically forming this very flexible craft. And when it was almost finished, he stood back and he looked up at the Maid of Beauty, and she was smiling. And he thought, just a few more things. And so he kind of hewed it on this side a little bit more and kind of polished it a little bit on this side. And he took a piece of sandstone and he sanded the bottom to make it smoother so it would go more easily over the water. And he thought, just one more thing I have to do. And he took his hatchet out. And as he was bringing it down, it ricocheted off of one of the stones, went all the way through the ferry boat, shattered it to pieces, and that hatchet came down on his knee. It opened a wide and deep gash, and the blood started flowing out of that gash. And it kept flowing and flowing. It went down, it covered the snow all the way down the hillside. The blood kept flowing all the way into the valley. And down in the valley where the little brown grasses were sticking out of the snow, the blood flooded over those and turned those brown grasses red. The blood kept gushing and gushing, and it was painful. But he was undaunted. And he hobbled around up there on the mountainside, and he picked up some lichen and some moss. And he stanched the bleeding as best he could. And he took a piece of cloth from the hem of his coat, and he wrapped it around to create a bandage. And as he started hobbling back to look for his sleigh, he looked up. and the rainbow had disappeared. And the Maid of Beauty was gone. And he remembered Dame Loie, crone, queen of the Northland. He remembered her caution. When she lent him the reindeer and the sled, she said, "Keep your eyes on the road ahead. Keep your eyes on the path. If you should whatsoever look to the sky or look upward, misfortune will befall you."
Väinämöinen had lost track of his reindeer, the one that Mistress and Dame Louie had lent him. As he was performing these magical arts, the reindeer got hungry and went off into the woods. Well, luckily enough, he was able to hobble along and he found that reindeer, and it hadn't gone too far. And he was able to get his sled, hook up the reindeer, and he collapsed into the soft furs. And with the crack of his whip, the reindeer through the snowbanks. Some of the snow had fallen on him. You know, when the snow falls, especially in the mountains, it just blankets. Well, you know, every time he's going around here, because he's going a lot faster than he normally would, he needs to get south because he's got this wound, and it hasn't stopped bleeding. He only kind of quenched it a little bit, but it's still going. And as he's going, he rode through the entire night, and he's getting cold. And by sunrise, he had reached the forest's edge. And because he had been panting so hard all night long, he had the icicles in his beard. And as the sun rising, and it shows on the barren mountain, and it shows that he has reached somewhere towards the south. Well, things are getting dire, and he says, "Oh, I need to get some help. I can't figure this out myself." And on the mountainside, he sees 3 cottages and a fork in the road. And each road that goes to the cottage is about equidistant as the other road. They're all the same length. Well, he decides to take the lower road, and he goes to the cottage. And as he's coming around, he sees the cottage, and there's smoke billowing from the chimney. And he sees a little light. So he goes up and doesn't get out of his sleigh, but he kind of gets up and he says, "Hail ho!" And a little boy comes out of the door. He says, "Welcome, stranger." And Väinämöinen says, "Do you know how to heal the wounds of iron? Do you know how to stop blood? Is anyone here that can help me?" And the little boy says, "Oh, it's just me here. Everyone's gone. You got to go somewhere else. Good luck." So Väinämöinen lays back down, and with the crack of his whip, he goes back down to the fork of the road. And at this point in time, he's panting very heavily. The blood is starting to flow even faster. And he goes down to the middle road, and he sees the cottage, and there's candlelight in the window, and he sees flickering, and finally gets closer. But he sees there's 2 old women in there, and they're talking, and he doesn't want to scare them. And so he says, "Hail ho!" a little softer. Well, they startle, and they come out, and they're like, "Are you okay? Do you need help? Like, come on in, come in, sit by the fire." And he feebly gets up, and he's groaning, and the blood is starting to really soak through. And he says, "Do you know how to heal the wounds of iron? Do you know how to stop the blood?" And they're like, "No, we know how to sew, and we know how to tell stories. We were just telling the story of the goblin, and also, you know, Mrs. Smith down the road too. But no, like, you need to go. We can't help you. You need to go to the other houses. There's someone else that can help you." So Väinämöinen collapses back into his sled, but the reindeer knew. He didn't even have to crack his whip. The reindeer knew and went back to the fork in the road, and then went to the highest road, to the cottage that was sitting there. And as Väinämöinen is in his sled going up, he says, "Hail ho!" And an old graybeard comes out of the door and says, "Welcome, stranger, welcome." And Väinämöinen says feebly, "Do you know how to heal the wounds of iron? Do you know how to stop the blood?" He says, "Yes. It takes 3 words to stop the flow of blood, but it takes 3 drops to stop or to heal the wounds of iron." And right behind the graybeard was his son, peeking over his shoulder, saying, "Welcome, stranger, come on in." And they welcome him into this home, and
Väinämöinen was losing energy fast. He was almost dead on his feet. So the graybeard and his son walked him into the cottage. They set him on the couch next to the hearth. They stoked the fire, got the fire going. And the graybeard said, "Son, that wound, it's flowing too much blood. Go find a container, something to catch the blood." And the son went to the back room and came back with a golden goblet. Graybeard set it down. In no time, that goblet was full of blood. The son went and got 7 pails, and the blood kept gushing and filled all 7 pails. The son went and got 8 more pails, filled all 8 pails. Now, the graybeard, he's getting angry. He clenched his fist and he said, "Listen, you wound. You stop this. You stop flowing. Bloodstream, you stay in his veins. Give him strength. Bloodstream, you stay in his heart. Give him courage. This is a hero. This is a good man. Do this now." Well, the blood slowed down. It didn't completely stop. And the graybeard, his face softened a little bit, and as if he remembered something. And he put his hand on the knee of Väinämöinen. And he looked up, closed his eyes. He says, "Oh, Creator, Jumala Creator, you're the one who heals everything. Help us to help this man. We need to heal his gash. We need to heal the wound caused by the bite of iron." And as he did that, he squeezed and pressed gently on that wound. And he closed the gash. And the blood stopped. However, by this time, old Väinämöinen, steadfast Väinämöinen, chief of the minstrels, master of the wizards, was almost out of all strength. And he was in pain and torment. The old graybeard took pieces of linen, wrapped it around the wound. And he said, "Son, go up to the top of the mountain where our smithy is and make the all-heal ointment, the ointment that I taught you how to make. And when it's done, when it's finished, and you've tested it, bring it back. And we'll heal this man, this hero, this chief, this minstrel, this wizard. Because as he is now, he cannot continue to live."
So the son heads out the door and says it will be done. And there is a little bit of pep in his step, because he's looking forward to brewing this ointment that he has been taught how to make by his father. But this is his time to do it himself, and he wants to prove that he knows what he's doing. And so he heads to the mountain that has the eastern-facing slope where the heather flowers grow, and he can see the pink hue dancing out of the snowbanks. And he knows that's where he needs to go, because that's where the smithy lives, on top of the mountain. And as he's heading up the foothills, he sees an oak tree. And he goes to the foot of the oak tree, and it's full of mangled branches and all these. And there's even a hole in the middle of the oak trunk, like we always see in the pictures and all that. And he says to the oak tree, "Father Oak, do you have any honey?" And the oak tree just kind of shivers a little bit. He says, "Yes, I've had so much honey that the bees actually came yesterday and took most of it away. But there might be some still on my branches." And so the young man climbs up the oak tree, and he sees that on the tiny little branches at the very top, there's these tiny little dewdrops of honey spread amongst the branches. And he collects them, and he breaks them off, and he puts them in the basket that he took with him. And he says thank you to the oak And he continues on his way up to the mountain towards the smithy. And along his way, he sees rocks here and there, and the places where the heather grows and the yarrow grows. All the different herbs that he has used before, and he knows what they look like, and he says his thanks as he gathers all of these ingredients for the brew that has to be made. And he continues up to the smithy's house, and with a wink to the smithy goes, and he brings out the big, large cauldron pot. And he fills it with all the twigs of the oak tree and all the herbs and all the mosses and everything that he gathered on his way up the mountain. And he fills it with the fresh spring water that was right there. And he has the smithy engorge the pot with flames. And for 3 days and 3 nights, he tends the fire. And he's constantly boiling down and filling it up and boiling down and filling it up and boiling down and filling it up. And the steam is equal to the smoke as it billows out of the thatched roof of the smithy. For 9 days, he opens the door and lets the sunlight shine in onto the boiling pot so that he may gather up the sunshine. And for 9 nights, he opens up the door so that the moon can let its nice white light glow into the pot so he can capture the power of the moon. And then on day 10, he sees that the brew is complete. It's this beautiful, golden, viscous liquid, and there's even little dancing rainbows on top. And he knows that this is the right ointment. He had done the job. So he lets it cool. And then by the next morning, he gathers up, and it's almost into a salve. This stuff is boiled so much, and everything is disintegrated, and it's this perfectly golden liquid. And he says, there has been no better salve than this. So he goes back to his home where Vainamoinen is, and he's going down, but he remembers he needs to test it. Because, it looks great, but he needs to make sure it works. And he sees a 300-foot white pine that had been split down the middle by a bolt of lightning. This is the test. And he takes the salve and he rubs it on the inside of the tree. And he sings the magic song that was taught to him. And as he's rubbing, he sings, "Make it whole, make it strong, heal its length all along. Join part to part, restore its heart, and let it be as straight as a hunter's dart." And with that, almost like it was reverse time, the tree came back up and was made whole again. And he says, "This is the stuff. We did a good one here." And he comes down the mountain, and as he's so happy that he had done it, he starts seeing cracked rocks, and he starts putting the salve on that, and he sees another log, and right there. And he continues on, and he keeps on healing the mountain as he's going down, and he finally gets to the Greybeard's house, his home, and he knocks on the door, and the Greybeard comes out, and his father says, "Well, do you have it?" He says, "There has been none better than this. If I had the heart, I would heal the mountains together."
Old Greybeard, father, he took that pot, brought that over. Vainamoinen is laid out on the bed. That gash, it's no longer bleeding, but Vainamoinen is in deep pain. The fever is taken over. The Greybeard rubs this on the wound, and he sings these little chants, these little songs. "Creator Jamala, Creator Jamala, heal him, heal him. You're the good one, you're the good one, heal him, heal him." Then he turns to the pain and he says, "Pain be gone. Be gone, be gone. Depart, depart. Go back into the mountains. Go back to the hill of tortures. Stay there. And if you must inflict something, inflict the stones. The stones can handle it. The old grandfather rocks can handle it. Depart, depart, depart. And he continues to sing his little chants, the little songs that he learned from his father, and his father learned from his father. And he sang praises to Jamala the Good, the great creator. And the wound disappeared. But old Väinämöinen felt more and more pain and was thrashing and thrashing and thrashing. And he started screaming in pain. And old Greybeard took a little bit more salve and rubbed it on the spot. Old Väinämöinen grew quiet. And then the fever passed, and his mind grew clear. And then he sat up. And then he stood up. And he started dancing. And he started singing his own songs. And he had a smile this big on his old gray face. And he says, I feel really good. What did you do? You know, I owe all my gratitude to you, Greybeard. And Greybeard said, oh no, this is not me. It wasn't me. He says, I'm just a vehicle for the Creator, old Jamala. Jamala did this for you. But I have something to ask you, old sage, old steadfast Väinämöinen. What is it that iron has against you? What revenge did iron take on you to give you such a terrible wound? Old Väinämöinen says, wait a minute. There is no revenge here. It's not iron's fault. He says, iron didn't do anything to me. If it weren't for the hornet, it's the hornet's fault. And old Väinämöinen started to tell the story of the hornet and iron. And that's another story that's as old as the human race. And it's a story that we don't have time to tell tonight. It's okay, because stories have secrets. And the secrets have to be released slowly. Like the secret of an acorn is released and becomes an oak tree, which then releases more acorns. And the secret of a wellspring is the water that flows up and starts dribbling down and joins the creek. And the creek flows into the river. And the river flows into the Mississippi. And the Mississippi flows all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, which is connected to the Atlantic, which is connected to the Indian Ocean, which is connected to the Pacific Ocean. And all of that water is then connected to everywhere else on Earth. And that's where this story is going to have to wait until we tell the next one.